All right, here I will say good morning. Let us begin. So we are in Mir Hashem towards the end of Os Nun Beis. We are picking up on page Kuf Chav Hey in Tzidkas HaTzaddik. So remember again yesterday, the Rebbe really taught us something incredibly amazing, which was based on the idea of the Yerushalmi, where the Yerushalmi says who was the Ribono Shel Olam's favorite generation. It was the Dor HaMidbar, the generation of the desert. And although at first glance that seems a little bit strange, especially given the fact that, again, as we mentioned, this week's parasha, Cheta Egel, Cheta Meraglim, all of the tragic, sinful activity, nevertheless what the HaTzaddik is saying is, yet that's the same generation that said Nasa v'Nishma. That if you want to speak about a generation that is demonstrative of the contrast of the different extremes which man could reach, Dor HaMidbar is a wonderful example. And the reason why ultimately, again, Dor HaMidbar is Chaviv Mikol HaDoros is because Dor HaMidbar teach us the power of change. The power of change. And that no matter what an individual has done, no matter how badly I've messed up in life, personalistic redemption is always possible. The Rebbe then quoted the beautiful pasuk from Shir Hashirim, Kishoshana ben hachochim, like a rose amongst the thorns. The thorns, of course, representing the sins, the averos of life. The rose, nevertheless, the identity of the rose could be preserved even in the midst of all of the thorns. So if we pick up on page Kuf Chav Hey, so the Rebbe says something so beautiful. He says, Va'adarabba, it's in the right-hand column. I'm reading in Be'urei Chasidus, the right-hand column, 5 lines in. Va'adarabba, Az chashivos nafsho tia yisera, acharei sheshav ha'adam b'tshuva shlema me'achet. We'll say, these Rebbe is going to talk about certain concepts with which we are all familiar with, but the way he frames them is so beautiful. So the Rebbe says, everyone knows that the chashivus of the neshama, the importance of the neshama, is manifest, especially in the aftermath of sin. In the aftermath of sin, he says, "Shahare." Listen to this: Shoshana shimitzuya ben hachochim, he chashuva yosra me Shoshana ben hashoshanim. So apparently, says Rebbe, this is so beautiful that there are different types of roses. Some roses grow amongst roses, and some roses grow amongst thorns. The most beautiful rose is the one that does not grow amongst roses. The most beautiful roses are the ones that grow amongst the thorns. It's so beautiful. The Rebbe says, Kimo shekasav, he quotes over here the Zohar, Sheshoshana shima'ale reach umuvcheres mikol shar havradim ba'olam. The most beautiful rose, the most fragrant rose amongst all of the roses in the world, Eino rak hahi ha'ola miben hakotzim, is the one which grows amongst the thorns. Is the one which grows amongst the thorns. So we'll say, hear what the Rebbe is saying over here. This is so incredibly profound. The truest fragrance is not when you're surrounded all by thorns. The truest fragrance in life is when you're surrounded all by roses. The truest fragrance emerges when the rose is surrounded by thorns, but still manages to be a rose, which is a truly incredible and beautiful idea. So the Rebbe goes on and he explains, V'divrei Azar halalo asa'in ba'im l'shitas kimandamar sheba'ali tshuva adifi gidolim b'ma'alosam mitzadikim gemurim. And this statement of the Zohar is very much in line with the statement of the Gemara Maseches Brachos, that Baalei Tshuva are able to occupy a spiritual space that is much greater than tzaddikim gemurim. Now obviously, this notion of a tzaddik gomer being someone who never sins, we saw this in HaTzaddik. There's no such thing as someone who never sins. But you understand this point. Someone who struggles, so I'll say, to frame it a little bit differently, someone who is constantly struggling with the thorns, but still manages to preserve his rose, is so much greater than someone who is just always a rose amongst the roses. Which I will say tells you something so... I know you've heard these concepts before, it's nothing new, but the way HaTzaddik frames it is so beautiful. HaTzaddik is saying do you know what the essence of life, do you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu appreciates most in this world? The struggle. The struggle. When I am willing to engage in the struggle, when I say, Ribono Shel Olam, there are so many thorns, and the thorns are always around me. You're talking about, now, I don't mean external adversity. That's true also. I will say, I think, there are moments in life, halavai, if you have the bracha, where maybe there's no external adversity. But there's always internal adversity. There's always the internal thorns, and I'm always struggling with them. And then I see people who are roses who live amongst the roses, and I'm always surrounded by the thorns, right? And I'm always not only am I always surrounded by the thorns, but often I'm going ahead and often getting pricked by the thorns, right? I'm getting cut by the thorns. I'm bleeding because of the thorns. And even today I avoid the thorns. Tomorrow I get stuck on the thorns. And yesterday I got stuck on the thorns. And the HaTzaddik says, just understand two things. Number one, your rose is always there. Your rose is always there. The rose never withers. The rose never dies. This goes back to what HaTzaddik said 2 days ago. I mean, he said a little bit longer than 2 days ago, but we learned it 2 days ago, where the Rebbe says the reason why change is possible is because chait never impacts the nefesh hapenimis. Sin never impacts the core identity of who you are. That always remains intact. Therefore, change is possible. So the rose is always there. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu appreciates more than anything in life is not when I am a Shoshana bein HaShoshanim. Because the truth is, it's easy to be a rose amongst the roses. The real challenge in life, and the real success story in life, is when you could be a Shoshana bein HaChochim. So then you could be a rose amongst the thorns. When you could preserve the beauty of your rose while battling your thorns each and every day, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says is life success. Imkain. So skip a little bit to the left-hand paragraph. So we'll say, so now the Rebbe takes this concept and really expands it a little bit. So look what he writes. He says, V'al ya'ale, on the left-hand column, Be'urei Chasidus, page Kuf Chav Hei. V'al ya'ale al adas, sheyitzarich lezezman. Rav Sober will say, I'm sidestepping a little bit some of his other theme, which is Mashiach. Now, we're going to come back to Mashiach also, but what the Rebbe really started this whole conversation is that the Rebbe was exceptionally intrigued by the concept that the generation of Mashiach, may not initially be worthy, but then ultimately, again, they are transformed into being worthy. So the Gemara discusses, remember again, we saw this a number of days ago, how does this happen? Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and is ma'amid, a melech shegzerosav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings about the despotic ruler, the gzeros motivate us to do tshuva, and the entire generation changes. So that was the springboard for this conversation. The Rebbe was intrigued by that change model, that you could have a generation that begins being quote-unquote unworthy, but then morphs into something incredibly worthy. So he goes on, he says, this is incredible. So we'll say there's two things happening over here. There's a national conversation and a personal conversation. It's the same conversation. It's the conversation of change. Conversation of change. In the Messianic context, so the conversation of change tells me that the generation could be undeserving one moment and then be transformed into deserving in the next moment. That's the national conversation. On the personal level, the same thing is true. That I could be a Shoshana, I could find my rose, even though, again, I am surrounded by the thorns. So the Rebbe says something amazing. He says, don't think, al ya'ala al adas, don't think that dynamic change has to go ahead and take a lot of time. Ad shi'avri Yisrael is called shlavei v'dargas hatshuva ad shi'agia al hatshuva shlema. Don't think that it has to take a long time until Klal Yisrael comes to the level of tshuva shlema. Both say again on a national level or on a personal level. Why? Ki tshuva gimura eino oreches zman klal. Ve'afsha shiyya berega echad. Wow. Let's say now we're beginning something that is transformative. Transformative. The Rebbe says, tshuva doesn't have to be a prolonged process. Real tshuva could happen in a moment. Could happen in a moment. Berega echad kidemuchach beperek beis b'kiddushin. As the Gemara proves to us in Perek Beis and Kiddush. So we'll say, let me show you his example, and then we're going to have to back up a little bit and understand this. What's his example? So the Gemara will say, famous Gemara, Shemekadesh es ha'isha al menas sha'ani tzaddik. Right? If a man is mekadesh woman, a man comes and betrothed as a woman. Conditional kiddushin. Hare'at mikudeshes li al minas sha'ani tzaddik gomer. A man says to a woman, become mikudeshes to me, on the condition that I am absolutely righteous. What's the halacha, says the Gemara? Afilu rasha gomer mikudeshes. Even if the guy is mamish a rasha gomer. Rasha gomer, nevertheless, the kiddushin is good. Why, says the Gemara? Choshishin shemehir her tshuva b'daito. Because maybe he did tshuva. Maybe he did tshuva. They understand why that's a strange Gemara? Because, again, if a guy goes in and says, become a Gudesh on the Kiddush HaTzaddik Gomer, and now we say, we're Choshish, maybe he did tshuva b'daito. That means that externally, what does the guy still look like? What does he look like? A Rasha. Right? In other words, I don't mean externally how he dresses. I mean like externally, as far as we know, he's still a Rasha. There's nothing to indicate to us that he has abandoned his rishus. The only thing that could possibly be happening is that internally something switched. Right? Shemehir tshuva bedaito. Maybe he did tshuva in his mind. So externally nothing looks different. But yet, we'll say, what do you see? That ability to be now again, even the lashon over here, shemehir tshuva bedaito. Here means what? Means what? A thought. A thought. He didn't do anything. He didn't change anything. The only possibility is that maybe he had a thought of tshuva. And yet, it's clear from the Gemara, that's enough. It's clear from the Gemara that is enough, and again, on a halachic level, to allow the kiddushin to take effect, right? He's a mekadesh woman with it tonight. You can be mekadesh with it tonight. I'm going to marry you on the condition you give me $1 million. Okay, so if the woman gives me $1 million, then she's mekudeshes. Marry me on the condition I'm a tzaddik gomer. If I'm a tzaddik gomer, good. So, even though the guy doesn't look like a tzaddik gomer, we've known him up until this point as a rasha. Shemehir tshuva b'daita, which tells you two things. Number one, tells you the power of thought in tshuva, which we'll get into. But according to HaTzaddik, also tells us that tshuva could be instantaneous. Tshuva could be instantaneous. So we have to stop over here. How that works. How you could have instantaneous tshuva. When I will say again, we normally think tshuva is a process. Tshuva is a mahalech. So the dynamic of that, in Meretz Hashem, we will see on Monday. Shkar Chabosei.